All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating, highly charged piece of political commentary surrounding a group known as the Fabian Society. We're going to take a totally objective look at a recent source that's making some pretty intense and provocative claims about this organization, really digging into what their argument is and exactly how they've constructed it.
To make sense of all this, we're going to break down the source's argument step by step, running through their core allegation, the origins and strategy, this whole wolf in sheep's clothing concept, historical controversies, modern connections, and finally, the ultimate question of control.
So, let's start right at the beginning. Section 1. The allegation, a secret society?
The source comes right out of the gate alleging that the Fabian Society isn't just your standard benign left-leaning think tank. No. The claim here is that they're actually a covert organization operating behind the scenes to essentially run the world. The argument is that they're dictating global government policy and wielding some massive, unprecedented, unelected power, all while masquerading as a harmless political entity.
Let's look at how this supposedly started. Section 2. Origins and Strategy, the 150-year-long game.
To really grasp this claim, the source takes us way back to their historical foundation. We're looking at a pretty rapid institutional growth here. Picture this, a group of socialists sitting down in London back in 1884, planning to completely remake Britain. But, and this is a huge detail, they specifically planned to do it without a violent revolution. Within just a few decades, they had a hand in founding massive, hugely influential institutions like the London School of Economics in 1895 and the Labour Representation Committee in 1900, which actually evolved into the UK Labour Party.
So how exactly do you achieve that kind of influence without a revolution? Well, the source focuses heavily on their primary method, a strategy they proudly called permeation. Instead of fighting from the outside, the whole point is to get inside established institutions. We're talking local councils, universities, the civil service, parliament itself, and influence decision-making directly from within. The commentary uses this really vivid analogy, comparing it to the old frog in boiling water concept. You slowly embed yourselves everywhere. So by the time the public realizes the heat is on, it's already boiling and it's far too late.
And their name actually gives this mindset away. The society literally named themselves after Fabius Maximus. If you don't know him, he was a Roman general from around 200 BC who was famous for his extreme patience. He'd completely avoid these big, decisive battles, and instead he'd just slowly wear down his enemy, waiting for the absolute perfect moment to strike. According to the source, picking this specific namesake proves the group has always been playing an incredibly long game.
Which brings us to a really interesting visual critique. Section 3. The wolf in sheep's clothing.
The commentary leans hard into the society's own visual history here, and honestly, it's pretty wild. Just 2 years after they formed, the Fabians adopted a logo, and that logo was literally a wolf in sheep's clothing. The commentator connects this straight back to the biblical warning in Matthew 7:15 about false prophets who look perfectly harmless on the outside but are actually ravenous wolves on the inside. The source is in sheer disbelief over this, asking why any group with purely noble intentions would adopt what they call the dodgiest logo of all time.
Building right on that, the source brings up a historical artifact called the 1910 Fabian window. It's an actual stained glass piece showing founders George Bernard Shaw and Sidney Webb literally striking the globe on a blacksmith's anvil. And the inscription reads, "Remolded nearer to the heart's desire." Hovering right over them, that exact same wolf in sheep's clothing logo. The source describes this whole setup as, quote, "creepy as hell," arguing that this imagery basically confirms their true intention to quietly but forcefully hammer the world into their own specific vision.
Now we get to the darkest part of the allegations. Section 4. Controversies, Eugenics, and Stalin.
This part of the explainer relies on a pretty stark paradox. The source points out a massive contradiction between the society's public image and their founders' private beliefs. On one hand, you have them publicly advocating for lifelong state care, public ownership, and government services. But on the flip side, their founders were quietly pushing for state interference in human reproduction. The commentary finds it deeply unsettling that the very same political circle advocating for a government that cares for you from cradle to grave also wanted that same government to dictate who was even allowed to have kids.
To back this up, the source isolates some pretty shocking historical quotes, like this one directly from founder George Bernard Shaw. He flat out stated that the only fundamental and possible socialism is the socialization of the selective breeding of man. The source uses this to argue that these founders weren't just playing standard politics, they harbored some intensely authoritarian views when it came to human eugenics.
The source goes on to highlight another early leader, Sidney Webb. Apparently, Webb was furious about the declining birth rates of the upper classes compared to the poor. The commentary maps out his logic in 3 distinct steps. First, observe those birth rates. Second, label the lower classes with horrible terms like feeble-minded and degenerate. And third, actively use state power to interfere and prevent them from procreating. It is a very dark piece of history being put front and center.
And the controversies don't stop there. The commentary alleges that these foundational figures didn't just have theoretical authoritarian views, they actively praised real-world authoritarian regimes. It notes that in the 1930s, Sidney and Beatrice Webb traveled to the Soviet Union and actually praised Stalin's system, calling it an inclusive and equalized democracy. Crucially, the source points out that they completely dismissed the horrific reports of millions dying in famines and purges at the time, brushing them off as fantastically excessive.
So how does all of this connect to today? Section 5. Connections to modern politics. To show the sheer scale of their permeation strategy, the source throws out a stunning number, 229. By 1945, the Fabians had grown from that tiny little group in a London living room to having 229 members elected to Parliament in the UK, and many of them were serving right under Prime Minister Clement Attlee. That is a massive leap in influence.
From there, the source drops a huge roll call of modern UK politicians. It emphasizes that the Fabian Society's own history claims literally every Labour Prime Minister has been associated with them. The commentary specifically names big figures like Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, and current leaders like Keir Starmer. It even points out that Starmer sat on their executive committee and that a huge chunk of his cabinet have declared Fabian membership. We're talking about very direct, modern-day political ties.
But it doesn't stop at the UK borders. The source crosses the globe to show this isn't an isolated phenomenon. It ties a bunch of former and current Australian prime ministers, from Bob Hawke and Julia Gillard all the way to current PM Anthony Albanese, straight to the Australian Fabian Society. By mapping this out, the commentary is really questioning the global scale of this permeation. It's asking how on earth did a single ideology quietly embed itself so deeply across entirely different continents? Which brings us to our final part, Section 6, the ultimate question of control. To wrap things up, the commentary turns the focus directly onto you, the viewer. After laying out this 150-year-long game of permeation, the controversial history, and this vast modern political network, it poses a highly provocative question. Do we actually have any real choice when it comes to our own destiny? Or has it already been prescribed for us by these long-standing political cabals acting as wolves in sheep's clothing? It's a heavy, heavy question, and the source clearly uses it to challenge us to look a lot closer at the political structures operating quietly in the background of our daily lives.